Hi everyone, it's Olivia from Girlybunches, and in this week's video I'm going to follow up on a few requests I've had now on to show you how to read crochet patterns. And I've got a few pattern books here. These are some old ones which I've picked up from eBay and charity shops. I've got one here that I've printed offline, which is for a particular brand of yarn which offer free patterns on their website, which is always a good resource for free patterns. And then I've got some books here which I've shown you before, which also have some patterns and wording in. So it's going to be quite difficult to kind of cover everything. So if I haven't covered everything in this video, do leave me a question in the description box down below and I'll do my best to answer it. And the reason it's quite tricky is because every pattern is written slightly differently. It's just how it is. There are a few set rules, as in the name of the stitches are abbreviated in a fairly common way, but not necessarily the same way. And I'll give you an example of that maybe in a minute if I can find the right place. I don't think I'll put a bookmark in my book. But you will find that, as I've mentioned before in most of my videos, I'm British, so I use British terminology. So the first thing you want to do when you're reading a crochet pattern is to work out what terminology it's written in, because if it's written in something that you're not expecting, then your project's going to turn out completely differently to how you expect it to. And I'll give you an example of that, as in this pattern here, which I've not read, I've not produced from before, I've not copied it, as in worked the pattern. But the first thing it tells you to do is work 6 chains and work a slip stitch into that first chain to make a loop, and then it says to chain 1 and then do 20 double crochets. Now if you're not aware that double crochet in British terminology or in American terminology is different, then you might start off your project the wrong way. So as this has a picture with it, that does help, because as we can see, those first few stitches in that first round are very short. If it was a double crochet and an American interpretation, then those stitches would be much taller. So I can instantly see that this is written in British terminology, so that's why I can relate to how that's being a short stitch, because a double crochet in British terminology is known as a single in American terminology. So it gets a little bit confusing, but a double crochet in American terminology is what I would call a treble. Done a whole video on this, and I will put a link in the description box below on the different names. But that using a visual aid is one of the key things to working out your pattern, because sometimes the wording won't make any sense, but if you can have a look at the pattern as how it's supposed to be whilst you're working out what the pattern actually says, then that's going to be a big help. And that's one of the reasons why I really love this book, which I've shown you before. I've got a couple of the books, is that what you'll get is you'll get a description of, you'll get a pattern, a picture of the pattern, a wording of the pattern, how to work it, and you'll get this visual diagram. Now to me, I really prefer diagrams, and I've covered that in another video, because there's no confusion about the names here. It's all the symbols are the same for the stitches, regardless of what I call them or what you call them. So that really helps to work out what stitches go where. But not all patterns offer that. So you'll just get you'll either get a picture and a diagram, or you'll get a picture and just some wording. And that's the wording that causes the problem, I think. I know that I get myself into a right mess with patterns, because it only takes the writer of the pattern to have missed out a few key words and commas and a few brackets to kind of indicate what should be repeated or not, and you get yourself into a right mess. But each pattern should consist of special abbreviations. So like if there's a particular part of the pattern that you will need to repeat, then they'll usually break that down into a separate explanation. So this one has a leaf explanation. So when it refers to the leaf in the main pattern, so it says working the leaf, then what it's referring to is this set of instructions aside from the main bulk of the body of the pattern written down, and this is explaining that one leaf is 5 double trebles into the same double crochet. So, you know, the first thing you need to do is just to read through the pattern. It's all very well setting your heart on making something, especially if it's a big item like a cardigan or something like that, a jumper. Then sit down, read that pattern first, really take it in and just work out, is it something that I can follow? Because it might be something that you want to do desperately, and I've been there, I understand, but when you come to do it, you just can't, because you don't understand the instructions. And that isn't the fault of the writer, and it isn't your fault either. It's just the way the writer is used to writing down the pattern and how they interpret it, and it's the way you interpret it. Because there isn't a set way of writing a pattern, then you're always going to have this problem where you just don't get it. And I've had it so many times, and I've had it in heartbreaking situations where I've bought the yarn, I've got my head set on making the thing, and I come to do it and I just don't get it. When that happens, what I try to do is follow the pattern as much as I can, and then use the visual reference and make it up as I go along. And I do that a lot, and I think I've said it before, and I've had other people say it, that patterns are just a guide to a finished result. It's so easy to just keep going, make the shape that you think you're aiming towards, because most of the time that will be right, and it will work for you. You just have a little bit more confidence, just have a go, and you'll be surprised at what you can turn out. You'll probably make it different to how the pattern showed you or how it's supposed to end up, but I bet you'll love it just as much because you've actually adapted that pattern to work for you. And if I just have a look through this, if I look at the beginning here, these kind of books are brilliant, really useful, because you get these kind of diagrams of stuff, but you also get these stitch explanations and like the symbols. So I'll stop waving this around. You get these symbols that kind of help you understand, but I've covered that in another video. But what you also get is these abbreviations, which are genuinely sort of the same throughout most patterns. So I often know that an HTR is a half treble, and a DC is a double crochet, and a TTR is a triple treble. Now that really helps, but when you're picking up these lovely old pattern books, again, these were written in a different way to how most people are used to reading patterns. So you'll get the general kind of first row, second row, third row, etc. And it starts with 1 SS. So I know that an SS means a slip stitch, but this book doesn't give you any abbreviations. It's assuming you already know those things. So that's when you need to do a little internet search. If you're not sure what an SS means, just put in SS crochet terms, and I know that means 1 slip stitch into the ring and then 8 chains, and so on and so forth. But it is just a question of, do sit down, read the pattern first, find out what the terms are, because it might have been written in a way that you didn't expect it to be. Like I've seen double crochet, which a double treble written, abbreviated as DBLTR. So DBL means double and the TR means treble, but if you're used to seeing DTR, then you may get a little bit sort of like, well, what's that? What does that mean? But if you can just look at the pattern and have a look at what it's supposed to look like, you can work these things out. Now, something else I wanted to mention, a lot of patterns, and I've done it in my own pattern writing, will use these little stars and say repeat from star to star. So what that's saying is have a look for where you'll find 1 star and another star. So you've got work one leaf, which is already shown on this other page as a special crochet info instruction. And then it says, where am I? Work one leaf in next double crochet, then do 6 chains, skip 3 double crochets, and then you've got that star, and then it says repeat from star to star. So it wants you to work with this between these 2 stars, and then once you've finished here, it wants you to start again and work that pattern again, and it will say and it will tell you for how many times. So this one says the entire round and finish with 1 slip stitch into the top of the first leaf. So that's, and then it will tell you how many leaves you actually should end up with, and that says 5. So basically you're repeating this part here between these 2 stars 5 times to complete your whole round. And those stars are very helpful when you're writing a pattern to save you having to make that whole paragraph huge, because that gets really off-putting, because to have to write that out 5 times, well, you'll get lost about the number of times you've done that. And that's where these little counter tools are helpful, or just marking on your printed out paper how many times you've done that leaf. But it will be obvious once you've started to work it. So another thing to mention, I think that patterns that are from a branded website, they will often show you a pattern that's designed for a particular line of their yarn. So this one is for their cotton viscose yarn, which is a 50-gram ball, and they say that you should try and use a 3mm hook when you're using that yarn. So what they're saying is the 3mm hook, in their opinion, is the best hook to use for that yarn, which is their yarn. So they're going to tell you what's best for it, but it doesn't mean it's best for you. If you have very tight tension, then you might want to use a 4mm hook. If you have very loose tension, then you might want to think about using a 2mm hook or a 2.5mm hook. Going 1/2 mil either side does help. I've done a whole video on that previously before, and I'll put a link down below to that. That's to cover crochet tension, but that's just something to keep in mind. Like this one is saying that they assume that you'll be able to get 15 of these out of a 50-gram ball of yarn using a 3mm hook. So if you've got your own type of yarn and that says that you should use a 5mm hook, then this is going to be much bigger because you're making it with a bigger hook and you've obviously got chunkier yarn. So this kind of information here goes out the window. So ignore that. Once you kind of deviate from what they're recommending, because they're giving you this pattern, then the sizing and the quantity goes out of the window. But I've kind of covered that in my tension video. So that's kind of all I really wanted to say at the moment, because it's a bit of an open-ended question how to read a crochet pattern. Like I said, all crochet patterns are written differently. It's just the way it is. It doesn't really help beginners. I totally agree. It's one of those learning curves that beginners do have to go through, but I think it's a really useful thing to go through and to put yourself through, because it really does help you understand a little bit more about what you're working with, how your end result will be, and how you can use those limitations, or like just abuse of those instructions, as it were, to kind of really make something different, unique to you. And like I said before, patterns are genuinely just a guide. They're not yes, if you can stick to them, that's great, but take it as a pinch of salt that this is kind of the roughest way to end up with this result. So this pattern I would say is going to be spot on, because it's such a small item that you're making. But if you're making something bigger, like I said, like an item of clothing, then you're really going to tailor it to you. So where it says to come out a bit more, you might need it to come back in a bit more, depending on your shape or who you're making it for. And that's what's so great about crochet, I think, is because you do have that ability to kind of add stitches in or take stitches away and do something slightly different. To me, I'm finding that easy to say because I'm not a knitter. It doesn't come as naturally to me as crochet does. and I can see where I can add stuff in and take it away. But with knitting, I find that difficult to kind of do because I know I'm going to have a lot of undoing to do, but with crochet it's really quick to undo and get back to where you started from. So I'll make this like a part 1 type video on how to read crochet patterns, like a beginner's let's get started type thing. And I'm pretty sure there'll be some other questions that people will have because I definitely haven't covered it all. So please do put some questions in the description box below, or you can find me on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram and ask me questions there. I'll always try and help. Obviously I'm a busy lady, so might not get back to you straight away, but I always do try and get back to people with questions like this because this really helps you sort of become your own crocheter, as it were, and maybe you could start developing your own patterns. But don't be scared of patterns, don't be scared of trying something, but always, and my best advice is, just read the pattern first and don't get put off by trying to work it, but just read it through first, and I'm pretty sure you'll find that you'll get it. So on that note, I will say thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Again, just drop me some questions down below if you have anything specific. I'll always try and help. And yeah, happy crocheting, and I'll see you again in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.